Please join me in give a warm welcome to KCarl.
Thank you for making me feel so welcome. I don't know about that chocolate angel. I still haven't quite figured that out. Thank you for inviting me to your community. This is a pleasure for me to come. It is an honor for me to come and speak to you. It is an honor to know that you're here tonight, and you can be doing a lot of things tonight, but you're here. I don't take opportunities like this for granted. Whenever God sends me somewhere to go speak, I will go speak. I'm not going to be like Jonah and go take a cruise. I got to go speak. Because if I don't go speak, that's right. Because if I don't go speak, there'll be some consequences. And I don't want to go that route. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself, add into what she mentioned in the introduction. I'm a native of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I lived there at a very young age. My father, being a math genius, he was hired by NASA in the early 1960s. So he was in the first group of black engineers that was hired by NASA. So we moved from Pine Bluff, Arkansas to Huntsville, Alabama. It's kind of interesting because at that time in history, most blacks in the South, getting out of the South, coming to St. Louis, Milwaukee, Chicago. My father went the other way. We went to Alabama. Oh boy, I remember those days. And I have 3 siblings. Of course, I'm retired military. I don't like using the word retirement because the word retirement is not in the Bible. So I completed my service obligation back in 1996 as achieving the rank of major. My oldest brother is a retired officer as well. I have a brother that's a pastor of 30 years. And my youngest brother is a PhD physicist. I put emphasis on that because he barely got out of high school. But that goes to show you, it's not how you start the race, it's how you finish the race that counts. Let me kind of share with you how I've come to this point of having this message that Yeshua gave me. I grew up in a strong Democrat Christian home. I was not converted to conservatism. I've always been one, I just didn't know it. I just didn't know it. What happened, one time somebody sent me a quote from Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass said on one occasion, I quote, he said, "I am a Republican, a black die-in-the-wool Republican, and I never intend to belong to any other party than the Party of Freedom and Progress." Well, having grown up in a strong Democrat family, when I read that quote, I said, wait a minute. Frederick Douglass was a Republican. Frederick Douglass was an Uncle Tom. He was a sellout? It just didn't make sense. Then that quote goes on to say, Douglass said Freedom and Progress Republican Party. My curiosity was why he didn't say Freedom and Progress Democrat Party. So that started me on the quest. So I read everything I could get my hands on that Frederick Douglass wrote. I read all 3 of his autobiographies. Philip H. Fauna has a selection of Douglass's writings. You can get it on Amazon. About 900 pages, 6-size font, the writings of Douglass. Yale University has something called the Douglass Papers, 3 or 4 volumes, 6-size font, over 1,000 pages. Frederick Douglass wrote more than Dr. Martin Luther King and the Apostle Paul put together. That brother did a lot of writing. 12 years of his writing was lost in the fire. So what happened to me was this. The Word of God changed my life. The writings of Frederick Douglass changed my thinking. And that's what I want to share with you tonight. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time that you shared your conservative values with a person who doesn't look like you? In other words, when was the last time you shared your conservative values with an African American, with a Latino, with a young person? A young man, a young woman. When was the last time you did that? Was it today? Was it yesterday? Was it last week?
Yes.
When was the last time you did it? You know, as conservatives, we got to be on the offense all the time. If you haven't done that, why haven't you done it? Because you know now, if we don't bring more diversity to the conservative movement, we are toast. So we got to do it. And when you did do it the last time, how did it go for you? Did you have a conference or did you have a confrontation? Were you able to inspire them to join the ranks of the conservative movement? This is a center-right nation. Most folks are conservative in terms of values. Now, many of us not voting along those values, but we're, in terms of our lifestyle, we're conservative. Matter of fact, Black Americans are some of the most conservative folks you have met in your life in the Latino community. When the last time you engaged them? Now, my purpose tonight, I'm not here to sound the alarm. I'm not going to stand up and say what we ought to be doing, what we need to be doing. We don't need anybody anymore to sound the alarm. We know what the problem is. The question is, what's the solution? The question is, as a conservative, how do I share my values with anybody without the fear of them calling me a racist, Uncle Tom, bigot, and sellout? How do I do that, KCarl? How, as a conservative, how can I take control of the narrative and frame the narrative and start changing hearts and minds? If we don't learn how to do that, we'll never bring diversity into the conservative movement. Do I have your attention? Yeah. We got to do that. We got to find a solution, and the time is now. We can't wait for the next generation to do it because it's going to be too late. And conservatives, we're the only dog in the fight to stop this European socialist agenda, to turn our nation to some European socialist country. We're the only dog in the fight. Success, we must win. Houston, we got a problem. Missouri, we got a problem. How do we do that? How do we do that? That's what I want to focus on tonight, because when you walk out of here tonight, I want you to be empowered. I want you to be equipped and trained how to go out and bring in new choir members. I'm preaching to the choir. The choir needs to go out and bring some new choir members in. And the choir needs a new song to sing, because the song we sing in the show ain't working. It's called the Frederick Douglass Liberty Messenger Melody. Okay? Let me before I get into the meat of that, let me quickly talk about Frederick Douglass, because Frederick Douglass is the glue to all this. Let me give you a quick 3 or 4 minute lesson on Frederick Douglass. Now, you remember Frederick Douglass, born 1818 in Maryland, in the Eastern Shores area. The way I like to put it, Frederick Douglass was born below poverty. See, when you're born into slavery, you don't own your own body. So you're born below poverty. So Douglass began his life as a sub-0%. He was a slave for the first 20 years of his life. He was a slave. Never owned a pair of shoes until he was 8 years old. Never slept in the bed until age 10. One thing you're going to learn about Frederick Douglass, that on the plantation, he learned how to read and write while he was on the system. He started his own homeschooling program to learn how to read and write. Because remember, at that time in history, 90% of Black Americans could not read and write. Douglass started his own homeschooling program because he rejected slave master Common Core curriculum. That's what he did. Flat out rejected it. That is the indoctrination program that doesn't educate you, it indoctrinates you. He rejected it. Matter of fact, as a boy on a plantation, once he learned how to read and write as a teenage boy, he started a reading ministry on a plantation. A slave for the first 20 years of his life. I could make the argument because the slave master was providing Douglass with shelter, food, clothing, inadequate health care. I could make the argument that Douglass, since he was getting this free stuff, he was a 47%. But the story doesn't end there. He escaped from slavery in 1838 at the age of 20. He escaped from slavery. Fast forward a little bit. Douglass had 0 days of formal schooling. No at all. Nothing. No days of schooling at all. No formal schooling. He was an advisor to 5 Republican presidents. Let's go through them right quickly. Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, James Garfield, Rutherford Hayes, and Benjamin Harrison. Most folks don't get a chance to meet one president. This brother was an advisor to 5 presidents. He was He wrote 3 autobiographies of his life. He wrote 3 books. He didn't have a ghostwriter. He wrote 3 books about his life. Frederick Douglass was a capitalist. Let me say that again so you think I said something different. He was a capitalist. He was a free market entrepreneur. He was a speaker on the anti-slavery circuit and also during the women's suffrage movement. He was part of that movement as well. Douglass died in 1895 at the age of 77. How much money in savings do you think Douglass had amassed at the time of his death in 1895?
Zero.
Zero? $300,000. $300,000 back then is more than $20 million today. So here's a man who began his life as a sub-0 percenter. He was born below poverty. He was a 47 percenter getting those entitlement programs the slave master was giving to him. Frederick Douglass died a 1%. Wow. That's a life worth elevating. That's a life worth sharing, because what I learned about Frederick Douglass, I don't care which victim category that the left put people in, no American today can out-victimize Frederick Douglass. You cannot victimize the man. So you cannot victimize when you start looking at Douglass's action plan for success. Douglass was a man of great influence. When you read and study Douglass, the NAACP owed their existence to Frederick Douglass. If you go back and read, go to the NAACP's website, on their history, their founder, one of their founders, a lady by the name of Mary White Ovington. She said what inspired her to get involved in the civil rights movement and start the NAACP was a speech she heard given by whom? Frederick Douglass. This is Black History Month. The father of Black History Month is Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Black History Month first started off as Black History Week. Black History Week became so popular that Dr. Carter G. Woodson expanded into an entire month. Dr. Carter G. Woodson said he picked February for Black History Month not because it's the shortest month of the year. He said he picked February for Black History Month because of the birthdays of 2 great Americans in the month of February. One being Abraham Lincoln, the second being whom? Frederick Douglass. When is Douglass's birthday? February 14th, Valentine's Day. Now keep in mind now, Douglass did not know the exact day of his birth, but he picked February 14th as his birthday for this reason. Hold on a second. When Frederick Douglass was born, he was immediately taken away from his mother. Douglass was taken away from his mother, separated from his mother. His mother lived and worked on a plantation that was 12 miles away, where Fred is being brought up. So in order to see her baby, after she worked all day in the field, she'll walk 12 miles to go see little Freddie. Spend about just a few hours with him, because why? She had to walk 12 miles back to the plantation before the first call. Douglass said, I can only recall meeting my mother on 4 occasions, but the time when I was with her, she always referred to me as my little Valentine. And Douglass said that's why he picked February 14th as his birthday. Thank God for giving us the life of Frederick Douglass to inspire others to discover their God-given gifts, their God-given talents, and take that obsession and make it a profession. That was Douglass's process. But more than that, his life. More than his life, thank God we have a literary legacy of the writings of Frederick Douglass to refute the lies and propaganda of the left. This is where this whole thing about engagement becomes important here. The writings of Frederick Douglass gives conservatives the leverage to control the narrative. Let me break that down for you. The political insight of Frederick Douglass is more important than the political insights of the founding fathers. That's blasphemy, KCarl. That's heresy. How could you say such a thing? Let me repeat myself so you don't think I said something different. The political insight of Frederick Douglass is more important than the political insights of the founders. Here's why I make this bold statement. The founders gave us two magnificent documents, did they not? The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now, at the time when the Constitution was ratified, that's not when the founders who owned slaves freed them. Many of the slaves were freed after the death of the founders, am I correct? So when it comes to liberty, the founders are tainted. And the left exploits that, do they not? These racist men who owned slaves gave us this racist doctrine. Do they? That's what they do. Now, on the other hand, Frederick Douglass did not own any slaves. He was a slave. And in his writings and his speeches, Douglass affirmed the founders and he affirmed the Constitution, and the left doesn't have an answer for that because Douglass was not a racist, he was a victim of racism. You follow me? Douglass one time talked about the Constitution. He said this, and I quote, Douglass said, "The Constitution reads, we the people. It does not read, we the white people," Douglass said. Douglass went on to say, if black folks are considered to be people, then therefore they should be benefactors of the Constitution. Douglass concluded by saying, the problem is not with the Constitution. The problem is in the application of the Constitution. The problem is not with the Bible. The problem is in how the Bible is applied. The writings of Frederick Douglass changed my thinking. I am a graduate of Historical Black College, Alabama A&M University. I was taught in college, and it's still being taught today in a lot of historical black colleges, that the founding fathers gave us slavery in the Constitution, referring to the 3/5 clause. Referring to the 3/5 clause, saying that blacks are 3/5 of a human being. I was taught that. Then I started reading the writings of Douglass. Douglass turned my thinking right side up. 1861, Douglass is in Glasgow, Scotland. Douglass gives clarity to the 3/5 clause, and you got to back up a little bit. When Douglass escaped from slavery, his mentor was William Lord Garrison. And the Garrisonians believed that the Constitution was a pro-slavery document. Douglass believed that himself. But Douglass did three interesting things. He went back and read the Constitution. Instead of taking face value what somebody was telling him, he went back and read the Constitution. He read the Federalist Papers, the Convention Notes. Then Douglass read a book called The Unconstitutionality of Slavery. When he read this, he said, wait a minute. Douglass said the Constitution is not a pro-slavery document, it is an anti-slavery document. And Douglass said, oh, this 3/5 clause, it has nothing to do to describe the personhood of a black individual. Douglass said it was a compromised approach used by the northern free states upon the southern slave states. Because what was happening at that time, the slave states wanted to count every black person in captivity as one person, one vote. They weren't going to let them vote. They want to count them as one person, one vote. They was going to vote forward. The northern free states said, no, if you free them, we'll let you count every black person as one person, one vote. But you got to free them first. Well, the southern states didn't want to do that. So the northern states said, well, we'll let you count the slave population at 3/5 of a vote. In other words, a black person in a free state is worth 5/5 of a vote, and a black person in a slave state is worth 3/5 of a vote. And when that happened, that limited the congressional representation of the slave states in Congress. Douglass wrote that. He turned my thinking right side up. Follow? Ladies and gentlemen, if we are serious about defending liberty, if we are serious about defending the Constitution, we must make Frederick Douglass an integral part of our message. If not, we're going to fail. Why? There's no other American icon that you can think of that can trump the propaganda attacks of the left. Nobody. Only Frederick Douglass. Through his writings and his life. He's the only one. You follow me so far? Let me share this with you. And I got this from reading Douglass. Douglass, when you read Douglass, Douglass had a practical mind. I want to share something with you that Douglass helped me understand And Yeshua developed this in my mind. I get this comment all the time about the founding fathers, these racist men who owned slaves. They gave us a racist document. And here's something you can use and you can share if you want. That God uses imperfect people to write noble documents. Yeshua used imperfect people to write noble documents. Moses wasn't perfect. He was a murderer. But yet God inspired Moses to write the first 5 books of the Old Testament. King David wasn't perfect. He had his issues with Bathsheba. And God inspired him to write the book of Psalms. The Apostle Paul wasn't perfect. He persecuted the Christians. And yet God inspired the Apostle Paul to write the majority of the New Testament. The founding fathers were imperfect. Some of them owned slaves. But they wrote a document that reads, "We the people, not we the white people." God uses imperfect people to write noble documents. That's just the left up. Now, this whole thing about engagement, we got to do it. And before I get into it, let me quickly talk about this Frederick Douglass Republican movement that I'm the president and the founder of. Let me do that by dispelling 3 myths. You got to understand these three myths that exist. One of the myths about our movement is this, that this is a black membership organization. It is not. To become a Frederick Douglass Republican is not based on a person's ethnicity. A Frederick Douglass Republican is a person who embraces the 4 life-empowering values of Frederick Douglass. These are the 4 core values that Douglass embraced that allow him to rise from a slave to a statesman and being born below poverty to prosperity. Number 1, respect for the U.S. Constitution. Respect for the U.S. Constitution. Number 2, respect for life. Number 3, the belief in the limited power of government. Now, notice now, I did not say the belief in limited government. The belief in the limited power of government. Because when you say the belief in limited government, what the left does, they'll turn that around and say, oh, you want to take away folks' entitlements. It's belief in the limited power of government. I don't need the government to tell me what kind of light bulb they put in my house. I don't need somebody to tell me what kind of food I need to feed my children. You stop your husband from smoking, you come talk to me later. You see what I'm saying? And the last one, y'all didn't get that, did you? It'll come to you later. And the last one is the belief in personal responsibility that comes out of 2 Thessalonians. If a man doesn't work, he should not eat. Okay? So if you believe in those 4 life-empowering values, you embrace those, you are a Frederick Douglass Republican. You follow me? So our movement is not a black movement, it's a liberty movement. If I had named it Ronald Reagan Republican, you wouldn't say it's a white movement, you say it's a liberty movement. Well, before there was Reagan, there was Douglass. You follow me? And plus, Douglass has a more universal appeal. I'll get into that in a minute. So that's the first myth. This is not a black thing, it's a liberty thing. It's based on values, not based on color. Number 2, we have developed an engagement methodology that I'm going to get into. We have developed an engagement methodology teaching conservatives how to message, how to engage. How do I create an atmosphere for political dialogue without the fear of being called a racist, honky-tonk, bigot, and sellout? How do I take control of the narrative? This methodology that we have engaged, it is not a methodology on how to engage black folks. It's a methodology on how you can engage anyone about your conservative values without fear of being called a racist, bigot, honky-tonk, or sellout. Now, like I said now, without the fear of being called a racist. I did not say the left's going to call you that, but you don't have the fear of it. Okay? The fear stops us. Got me on that one? And the last one is this. This is what I'm going to dive into. The last myth is this. If you watch some of my videos, I say it over and over, is this. I contend that the greatest resource we have available to us is not being utilized to save our nation. I believe that the greatest resource we have to save our nation is with mainstream or white conservatives. Just look in this room and throughout this room. It's predominantly white. But nobody has taught you how to engage. Nobody has taught you how do you share your conservative values with people who don't look like you. No one has taught you what words you don't use because these words are politically explosive. It's not that people disagree with you, but they ignore you because you're using the wrong word. You follow me? Through the ministry. I need to take some water on this one. Take some time. You gotta follow me here. Through the ministry of the Apostle Paul, God has given us the blueprint on how to do diversity outreach. Through the ministry of the Apostle Paul, God has given us a blueprint on how to do diversity outreach. God called and commissioned the Apostle Paul to take the gospel to the Gentiles, did he not? Yeah. Paul was called and commissioned to take it internationally. People of different races, ethnicities. Isn't that what we're trying to do? We call it diversity outreach. We're trying to share the life and power message of our philosophy, the conservative philosophy, to people of different ethnicities. You follow me so far? By occupation, the Apostle Paul was a tent maker. Am I right about that? If you don't believe me, check everything I'm saying out. I'm not making this stuff up. The Apostle Paul was a tent maker. God called the Apostle Paul and commissioned him to establish a big tent. Big tent is a metaphoric expression for diversity outreach, diversity inclusion. Conservatives and Republicans, they say all the time, we got to establish what? A big tent. The Apostle Paul was a diversity outreach specialist. 1 Corinthians 9:22, the Apostle Paul says this, I have become all things to all people. What did he mean by that? He said, KCarl, he and I talked last night. He said, KCarl, I knew how to craft my message where I could reach a wide range of people. Jews, Gentiles, Galatians, Ephesians. You follow me? In some of the translations you read, Apostle Paul said, I entered their world and I experienced life from their viewpoint. That's how I knew how to craft my message. That's what we must do as conservatives. Here's my point. The word conservative and the name Republican Party, those words are not the language of liberty in minority communities, especially the black community. They are the words of oppression. If you call yourself a black conservative, Reagan conservative, Christian conservative, it's okay to use that expression here. But if you want to do outreach and establish a big tent, that's what you're saying, because what's happening through negative propaganda, we're getting our clocks clean. Before we get a chance to speak as a conservative, we've already been discredited. The left, they are the masters of deceit and the masters of propaganda. So if you use that word and you're out there engaging in the public sector, and that's what you're saying, but that's not what they're hearing. What they're hearing is this. You're a black conservative, you're a black racist. You're a Reagan conservative, you're a Reagan racist. You're a Christian conservative, you're a Christian racist. If you identify yourself as a Tea Party conservative, or as a constitutional conservative, you're a racist. We're losing the propaganda battle. See, we don't have a message problem, we have a messaging problem. That's why the ministry of the Apostle Paul is so important. Go back and read 1 Corinthians 9:22, what Apostle Paul said. Apostle Paul said, basically, I became a servant to any and to all. He said, I didn't take on their ways, but I knew how to craft my message. I could bring them all in to Christ, he said. You follow? That's what we have to do. And Paul said, when you do this engagement, you got to have a servant's heart. Meaning that if I know the word conservative is offensive to you, why would I use that word in front of you? That's not having a servant's heart. That's having a self-centered heart. I'm here to tell you some of the worst when it comes to engagement of the minority community are black conservatives. I talk to them. And I didn't, at one time, I didn't get the stuff right either. I had to be trying. But what a lot of them are saying to me, they say, KCarl, I disagree with you. I'm proud to call myself a conservative. Reagan called himself a conservative. I said, it's not about what you think. It's what they think. Enter their world and experience life from their viewpoint. The word conservative, the word Republican Party, because of negative propaganda we're losing, those words have become culturally ingrained in the black community especially to mean racism. And it's not just propaganda. Conservatives and Republicans based on historical mistakes. I'm going to cover this quickly, but I'm going to talk about this online course. I did an online course. I'm going to get into it. When I get into the meat of this, you got to understand that 1964, July 2nd, 1964, that's when LBJ signed the civil rights legislation into law. Your staunch, pro-segregationist, racist Democrats filibustered and voted against it. Right? Now, there were some Republican senators who also voted against it. One in particular was a brother from Arizona by the name of Barry Goldwater. Now, Barry Goldwater voted against the bill not because he was a racist. He voted against it based on constitutional grounds. He had problems with Title II that dealt with entitlements, that dealt with accommodation, and Title VII that dealt with employment. Now, Goldwater was not a racist. He was an integrationist. In fact, he was an integrationist. When he inherited his family's department store in Phoenix, Arizona, he was the first business owner to hire black cashiers. He helped found the NAACP chapter in Arizona, and he took money out of his personal pocket to keep the Urban League in the black. Barry Goldwater integrated the Senate cafeteria in D.C. in 1953, I believe it was. He did that. But what happened now, with his vote, he sided with the racists. You follow me? With his vote, he sided with the racists. Now, connect these two important dots. What was Senator Goldwater's nickname? Mr. Conservative. What was the title of the book he wrote in 1960? The Conscience of a Conservative. You follow me? That's when it all happened. Because in 1960, Richard Nixon, when he ran against John F. Kennedy, Richard Nixon got like 32% of the black vote. When Goldwater ran, Goldwater got 6% just 4 years later. 6%. Many of my family members were Republicans until 60 and 64. And ever since 64, we lost control of that. We gave it away, in my view. We gave it away to an undeserving Democratic Party. Because when you look at the facts of history, the party that supported slavery in the South was the Democratic Party. The party that started the KKK to go around terrorizing black folks in the South so they wouldn't vote on the Republican ticket was the Democratic Party. The party that gave us Jim Crow law, segregation law, the black codes was the Democratic Party. They calling us racist. Why? They have control of the narrative. The question is, you got to get it back. How do you get it back, KCarl? You get it back through Frederick Douglass. You get it back through the life and the writings of Frederick Douglass. Because the writings of Frederick Douglass refute the lies and propaganda left. Am I a conservative? Yes. But that's not how I identify myself politically. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. That stuff trumps the race card. So don't tell me, don't tell me that because I'm a white Republican or white conservative, I cannot engage people of different ethnicities. Through the ministry of the Apostle Paul, God shattered that myth. He didn't call a Galatian, go talk to Galatians. He didn't call a Ephesian, go talk to the Ephesians. He took Paul, a Jew, to go talk to all of them. But Paul was trained. Paul was trained by Gamaliel. Am I right about it? The Sanhedrins. We got to be trained. The time is now. We can't wait for the next generation. It's too late by then. We can't wait till November to do it. We got to be a momentum up now to do it. We got to do it. I don't travel the country to hawk a book. I come to share with you a message that God has given me that works. It works. It empowers conservatives how we can take control of the narrative, how we can change hearts and minds, how you can bring some political healing to your own families. You raised them to be conservative, go and get this education, come back as little socialists. Now they call you a racist. How do you engage them? We have the right message. It's the messaging problem we're lacking. And the messaging must incorporate the diversity outreach strategy of the Apostle Paul, and it must incorporate the writings of Frederick Douglass. See, the writings of the founding fathers is great, but you can play the race card on them. And the left expressed that. You can't play the race card on Frederick Douglass or a person on a Frederick Douglass Republican. You follow me? So over the past 7 years, 8 years, I've been traveling the country and doing workshops. It's called Frederick Douglass Republicans 101. 3-hour workshop teaching conservatives how to engage, how to take control of the narrative, how to drive the narrative, how to change hearts and minds, how to engage anyone about your conservative values, and you stay cool as a cucumber. Your blood pressure don't go up. How do you do that? And I come to the conclusion, I can't be everywhere and do this training. And we're running out of time. So I said, well, you know, I got to make myself scalable. I think they say that in the IT world. I got to make myself scalable. I got to find a way to duplicate my effort. Then, the internet. So came up with an online course. The online course bears the same name, Frederick Douglass Republicans 101. How to share your conservative values without the fear of being called a racist, Uncle Tom, big of a sellout. It is about a 4.5 hour online course, strictly video driven. I went to the studio, I get in front of the camera, and it's mano a mano, you and I share my testimony with you a little bit more. This is total 11 modules. I get into talking about what I call the elephant in the room. I get into more detail what happened in '64, how we lost control of the narrative. And what the left is doing to keep, here's something in the course I'm going to share you now. So you have an idea what we're dealing with. So now, the Democrat-controlled left, they have control of the narrative, and they don't deserve it based on their racist history. They don't deserve it based on the facts of history. But now, they're not going to give that control up because it's a major advantage. To keep control of the narrative, the left do two things, and they do it every day. They accuse, they got to call you a racist. So when you speak, you've already been discredited, and your message falls on deaf ears. It's not that people disagree with us. They ignore us, because we've already been discredited. They accuse, and they rewrite history. These are, in my opinion, satanic strategies, demonic techniques. Revelation 12 and 10, Satan sits at the throne of God all day long, all night long. He is the accuser of the brethren. He does it all day long. Accusing us of what he's guilty of. Doesn't that sound like the left? Satan rewrites scripture. The left rewrite history. Here's your homework assignment for the night. I want you to go home, get on the computer, go to the Democratic Party's website. Now, let me explain this too. As a Frederick Douglass Republican, our movement, we're not beholden to any political party. I got problems with the Democrat Party and Republican Party. Republican Party is bad. Democrat Party is worse. And what we're all about, we're people who really stand in the middle of both parties through agitation and saying we need people in both parties with a Frederick Douglass perspective. We need some truth tellers in both parties. So we agitate them. On the Democrat Party's website is Democrats.org. It's Democrats.org. Go all the way down to the bottom of their website. They have some menus down there, and one of the links says history. It may say our history. I think it says our history. When you click their Our History page, it brings you up to their history page. At the top banner on their Our History page, the first part of that paragraph reads this, and this is a quote. Now you tell me what problem you got with this thing. Quote, for more than 200 years, we have led the fight for civil rights. That's on their website. Satan rewrites scripture. The left rewrite history. Now here's why Frederick Douglass is important. 200 years ago, 1816, slavery was alive and well in 1816. Douglass was born in 1818. In 1853, Douglass gave a speech called the Slavery Party. He said in that speech, he said, at present, the best representation of slavery in politics is the Democratic Party. Now somebody's telling a lie. Thank God for the literary legacy of Frederick Douglass to defeat the lies and propaganda of the left. Once we get this Frederick Douglass message on the national level and we get you trained on how you can engage anybody and you got this knowledge in your head too, the left got to jump out of windows and go back to France. They can't stay here. They got to go. They can't take this truth. You follow me? But you got to come out of the closet and start engaging people who don't look like you. You got to do that. I can't do it for you, but I can train you how to do it. It works. If you can change your family members, you can change anybody. Woo! And we did that. And I grew up with a strong Democrat family. Talked to my brothers. Sure, Douglas' writings with him. The 3/5 clause, got him. Talked to my mom. She was the last one. I said, Mother, it doesn't matter what party you're in. I said, God don't care about that. But Mother, when you go into that booth, now don't think he can't see what you're doing. He is omnipresent. I said, Mother, what's more important is not what party you're in. It's not about the label. It's about the principles. I said, Mother, you vote your values. The way in which you vote, Mother, does it show your love and your allegiance to the God you say you serve? I didn't say anything else. When you read my testimony or watch the testimony in the video course, it was 2 Corinthians 13:5 that changed my life. 2 Corinthians 13:5 in the Message translation. I know the Message translation got some bad translations in it, but this is the good one. The Message translation reads, examine yourself. Make sure you're solid in faith. Test yourself. You need regular checkups to make sure God is in you. If you fail the test, do something about it. So I started testing myself. I started testing the way I was voting. Okay. I don't believe in same-sex marriage, but I'm voting that way. I don't believe in abortion, but I'm voting for a party that espoused that. God diagnosed me and told me I was a political schizophrenic. I was crazy. I worshiped one way and voting in another, and through my vote, I was spitting in his face. I wouldn't do that on purpose. So what has to happen in the online course, you're going to learn that the formula for successful diversity outreach is this. Here's what conservatives make a mistake. Our job is not to convert anybody. That's the Holy Spirit's job. All you want to do is to inspire, and inform, and they belong. Just make them aware. You want to inspire and inform. Inspire and inform. Inspire, that's the life of Douglass. It's inspiration. With the adversity he's overcame, became a 1%er. Nobody started life so low. Nobody started life so low and rose as high as Frederick Douglass. His life is inspirational. You also want to inform. The information, that's the writings of Douglass. Douglass on the Constitution. Douglass on the 3/5 clause. Douglass on slave dependency. Douglass wrote about immigration. Douglass wrote about immigration. He wrote about the role of government. See, once you equip yourself with this in your knowledge bank, once you equip yourself with, now you have something you can go out and engage people with, and you're not just referring to the founders, you're referring to Frederick Douglass, who defeated the propaganda attacks of the left. You follow me? That's why Douglass writes more important, because he writes with a former slave perspective. Nobody brings that to the table. You follow me? So this is not a black thing, this training. It is not diversity training. It is liberty training, Frederick Douglass style. Have I made myself clear? Gotta do this thing. So here's what I want to do. My course normally sells for $97. I wish I could give it to you for free. I can't. I wish I could do that. I'm just not in a position to do that. But I'm running a Black History Month special. You can take the course for $49. $49. And you get unlimited access to the videos for a whole year. Now, let me tell you, we ain't got a whole year to save this nation, okay? You need to take the class as quick as you can, get trained in it, and start practicing on it. When you take the online course, I talk about in-reach. In-reach is more important than outreach. In-reach means that there's some training we need to do before we go out and do outreach. In-reach is practicing on your friends and your family members, people you know, because you're going to see them over a period of time. You practice on them, that's in-reach. Once you perfect it, then you're going to talk to strangers, that's outreach. If you can talk to your family members and your friends, ooh, mercy, you make it through that. You make it through outreach. Outreach is a piece of cake. You follow me? But you practice on them. There's no final exam in the online course, but I do have a practical application. Once you complete the online course, the assignment is, you gotta find a friend, a family member, who are probably just as conservative, more conservative than you are, and you engage them. You engage them. And then send me a selfie video and tell me how it worked out for you. You gotta practice the pattern. You gotta practice the pattern. This is really nothing new to you. I'm not talking about values that you don't understand. You live these values. I'm just giving you a vehicle. I want to share this with you. The reason why we're so successful with this methodology, especially in the black community and Latino communities, and not just that, just in American period. When someone makes their mind up and accept a conservative tone, a conservative language, or become part of a conservative movement, and when they go back and tell family members about it, they're going to go through some intimidation and humiliation. You follow me? So what we've done in our message, it was unintended, but this is what we have done. What this Frederick Douglass Republican methodology does, it gives you cover and it gives you confidence. It gives you cover and confidence, meaning that when I make that move and tell my family about it, I know I can pull from Frederick Douglass to explain what I'm talking about. That's my cover. And the confidence comes from understanding on how to handle the challenges that's going to come my way. Why? Because I'm going to learn that in the online course. You follow me? That's why Senator Guillory from Louisiana switched parties. What happened was I was invited to speak down in Louisiana, and I was supposed to give out their first Frederick Douglass Award to a local politician. That was Senator Guillory. I said, no, I'm not going to give out any awards until I talk to this man and found him to make sure he exemplifies the values of Douglass. So I called him up, talking to him, asked him questions about his voting record. Then Senator Guillory said to me, you know, okay, Carl, I'm thinking about changing parties because the Democrat Party's kind of gotten away from my values. I said, well, why haven't you done it? He said, well, I've been struggling with this thing for 3 years. Why haven't you done it? I know when I do it, I don't have any cover in my constituents. I'm going to have some problems with that. They may leave me, it may be political suicide. I said, you're exactly right. So I start talking to him and coaching him on the Frederick Douglass Republican methodology of engagement. So when he did his video, who was in it? Frederick Douglass. It gave him cover. Not only did it give him cover, it gave him confidence now where he can engage his family members and start going back to family reunions. And start talking about his values. And start going back to Thanksgiving dinners. And cutting the turkey. You know, that kind of thing. I was in Chicago speaking at a Tea Party group. After I spoke, a guy came up to me and said, KCarl, I want you to know that I have it in my will that on Thanksgiving Day, no liberal can come to my house. I said, what do you care? You're not going to be here. I don't want my wife to have to go live by herself. There's some serious stuff out there. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to empower you with something that works. What are your questions? Oh, let me finish the package. Here's what I want to do. Normally, and I'm doing this here because I'm here, when people go to the online course now, they take the $49 online course, that's all you get. You get the unlimited access to the course for up to a year. You get discounts in our web store. And I do a monthly webinar or a monthly conference call where I reinforce what you've learned in the online course, answer your questions, and I talk about how to handle the challenge. It's a coaching session. That's all part of the package. That's what people get now. What I want to offer to you is this. You get if you do this tonight, $49, You get all that, and I'm gonna give you a sign. I give you with that a signed copy of my book. I give you a signed copy of my book that goes with that. So when you don't have the course with you, you got the book with you. That's the best I can do. After this month, it's gonna go back to $97. And it sells $97 all day long. Because people want this, because it is the answer. I promise you, I'm not gonna come up here and ring the alarm. I'm giving you a solution. I'm giving you a strategy of what you can do to get out the closet, get into the arena of political dialogue, and learn to take control of the narrative and save this country. We have the truth on our side. Nobody's taught mainstream. Matter of fact, nobody's taught black conservatives how to engage. I didn't get it right. I had to be trained. I had to be trained. Now that this message has been perfected in me, I'm able to pass this knowledge on to you. And so let's get out there. Now is the time. Now is the time. The only thing missing was how. You can't get better than the diversity outreach strategy of the God. You can't get better than that. So by dissecting Apostle Paul's outreach strategy, it helped us to form what we're doing here. It's about using the right words. I'm not saying don't use the word conservative. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying stop using it, but you gotta understand that when you use it, you gotta base it on your audience. Okay? Don't throw a word on somebody. Also, we're speaking. He said, KCarl, I'm proud, black conservative. I'm proud to call myself black conservative. I don't care. I said, listen to what you're saying. So you're going to go in the black community and you're going to tell them, I'm a conservative, you got to own up to it. You're saying you don't care about them. St. Thomas Aquinas, I'm going to shut up and get to your question. St. Thomas, they call him the great persuader. He said this on one occasion. He said, if you want to get somebody to join your way of thinking, you don't shout at them from across the room. You don't shout at them calling dummy, dummy, dummy like Fred Sefton would do. You don't demand that it come stand next to you and take on your lexicon. St. Thomas Aquinas said, you go over to where he or she is standing and you take the position next to them and you grab them by the hand, mentally speaking, and you got it. You got to do it in love. Non-condescending, non-confrontational. That's how we do it. I said I was going to sit down and take a question. I got one more thing to say. Then I would sit up. God sent me to places to speak, to live this message that most folks wouldn't dare to speak. You ever heard of Forsyth County, Georgia? Mm-hmm. Lord have mercy. I was invited to speak by the Forsyth County Tea Party to go to Forsyth County, Georgia. I don't know what you know about Forsyth County, Georgia, but back in the 1920s and 30s, they lynched a man downtown in Forsyth County. Forsyth County, Georgia, was supposed to be so racist that Oprah Winfrey went there and broadcast a show. I was invited to speak there. I couldn't make it because I had a scheduling conflict, so I sent my brother. Y'all didn't get that, did you? I actually had a scheduling conflict. But anyway, if you go to YouTube, type in Forsyth County Tea Party, and just type in Smith, you'll see his 2-part video. What happened was, we shared this message with them. It wasn't training, we just shared the message. In 2 months, they called me back and said, guess what, KCarl? I said, what's that? We just inspired 6 blacks to join the Forsyth County Tea Party. I said, wait. He said, KCarl, they didn't join us conservatives now, KCarl. They joined us Frederick Douglass Republicans. It's covered. You follow me? That's all I got to say. So this whole thing that Yeshua has given me, it's been Forsyth County tested and black barbershop tested. It's not, I didn't go to the barbershop, my brother. That's my brother barbershop too. What are your questions? Make sense to you? So if you want to sign up tonight, and let's say if you don't want to sign up, say, Carol, I just want your book. Well, if you want the book tonight, I have books here. The books are free. The autograph inside each book is $15. I'm a capitalist, what can I say? What questions you have? I hope I've been able to empower you guys.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can we role play for just a little bit?
Sure.
Anybody want to engage in a little role play here? Well, hi, are you KCarl Smith?
Yes, I am. How you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Who's our guy for president?
I haven't joined any particular camp, but I'll tell you this. I'll take anybody over who we have now on the other side of that party. So because we need somebody who has leadership and who will not compromise values. So it's all about voting your values. Let me share something with you.
Voting values.
Let me share something with you. And I did not learn this. When you go back and you read history, the first 7 blacks who served in the U.S. Congress were black Republicans. One of these guys, his name was Robert Brown Elliott. Now, you don't have to say all this. I'm just trying to get you out.
Blowing my away already.
One of these guys was Robert Brown Elliott. He was one of the first black congressmen in the U.S. Congress. He said, I am a slave to principles. I call no political party master. I'm a slave to the Word of God. I don't call the Democrat Party or the Republican Party master. I'm going to vote my values. That's what it's all about. And that's the message we got to get out. We got to start to vote the values. And start having this blind loyalty to a party and the donkey. I used to vote the donkey. That's sad, isn't it?
So you mean to tell me, whatever you just said, that you are not a Democrat?
No, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not really a Republican. I'm in the Republican Party, but that's not I'm not a slave to them. I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. And what I mean by that, I believe in the 4 life empowering values of Douglass. Respect for the U.S. Constitution, respect for life. I believe in the limited power of government, and I believe in personal responsibility. And I believe in elevating the poor to become employees and entrepreneurs and help them to jumpstart their life on entitlement, not to stay on entitlements. That's what I believe in.
I'm pro-choice though. What
That's
about
fine.
this pro-choice thing?
That's fine. I am too. Respect for life. I will share this with you. I'm going on a tangent here. I spoke somewhere, and a lady came up to me after I spoke. She said, I want to thank you for introducing Frederick Douglass to me. I said, okay. She said, Douglass helped me to understand that when I had an abortion, I had a slave master mentality. I said, what you mean by that? She said, the slave master, KCarl, when he had lives, the black lives on the plantation, he could, because he saw them as property and things, he could indiscriminately kill them. What I saw in my stomach was a thing. And I had that abortion. Thank you for giving me Frederick Douglass. I get that too. You can use that when you want to.
But I also think that my college should be paid for.
That's very interesting. That money has to come from somewhere. I think one thing to keep in mind, always follow the money trail. That money has to come from somewhere. It don't just appear on the money tree. Nothing is free. I think this. I think that whatever we work for, in terms of our effort and our talents, we deserve that. But no reasonable-minded person that has the ability and function to get out here and work should get anything free, because that's slavery.
Getting something free is slavery?
Sure it is. Sure it is. Again, when you read the online course, Douglass talks about that. Douglass said one time, Douglass said one occasion, his master walked up to him and said, Freddie, he said, make no plans for the future, I'm going to take care of you. Douglass said, He said, that had an opposite effect on him. Because he started right then to plan for his escape. That's why the writings of Douglass is so important, because here's what I learned. And one thing what I do when I engage people, I don't give them a communism metaphor or a socialism metaphor, because most folks, especially young generation, they don't understand that. You give them a slavery metaphor, bring Douglass in, because with Douglass, slavery was not a metaphor. It was reality. But you got to get into Douglass' writings to have it as part of your knowledge base. You follow me? So in the online course, what I did, remember those 4 life empowering values? I go through and I give you 5 quotes from Frederick Douglass, what he said about the Constitution. What Douglass said, you think you're reading Reagan. What did this ex-slave say about the Constitution? Respect for life. The abortion issue was not the issue in Douglass' time, but Douglass was an ordained A&E Zion preacher. Douglass was a preacher, so Douglass talked about respect for life. Douglass wrote about the role of government. Douglass said on one occasion, Douglass said, quote, he said the first duty of government, he called the national government, the first duty of the national government is protection, not to provide for me. Yeshua is my provider. Douglass writes about that. Then, personal responsibility, that's simple. 2 Thessalonians, a man doesn't work you shouldn't need. Why did Douglass escape from slavery? He wanted a chance for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. He wanted personal responsibility.
I've enjoyed your presentation very much, thank you. And my history is a marketer.
Yes.
I made a living, all of my working career, in convincing people to do something they didn't know they wanted to do, or to buy something they didn't know they needed. And so I have sort of a wall against someone trying to convince me of something that is not truth.
Right.
This is what I really appreciate about your presentation. And the point you're making is that it's not a manipulation.
No.
As in marketing, it's not a manipulation of any kind. It is simply phrasing truth.
Yes,
And I
yes.
appreciate
Hit it from the
that.
side.
It's not, but it's true.
It's true.
It is not trying to offer something to get what you want at their expense.
That's
It's
right.
true.
Exactly right.
And whoever, and I'm not saying they is anybody, they is anyone
Right.
who values life but votes another way. I
That's
don't
right.
care what color they are or what ethnicity they are. It's true, and that I appreciate.
Truth
So
will
for
set us
that,
free.
thank you.
I was talking to a gentleman earlier about the whole thing about engaging. And I didn't critique him at the time, but the comment he made was he was talking to somebody that rents a house from him. And he said that he was talking about the facts and evidence. Here's what you gotta keep in mind. When I was a Democrat and I had that mentality, I rejected truth, I rejected facts, I rejected evidence. Why? I'm talking to a racist. You saw what I'm saying? So we gotta improve our image so our truth will resonate. But if I perceive you to be a racist, if I perceive you to be an Uncle Tom, I don't care what truth or evidence you speak, I ain't got time for you. With me, whenever I heard the word conservative, the first time I heard the word conservative, I wasn't even 10 years old, I heard conservative, Goldwater, racism in the same sentence. That's just what happened. But you know, he was not a racist, but that's how it was stirred up by the left. So you're exactly right. It's all about truth. That's one thing that we advocate and we talk about. All we are truth tellers. I'm going to tell the truth about the Democrat Party when they do something wrong. I'm going to tell the truth about the Republican Party when they do something wrong. It's about being a truth teller. That's what it's all about. And I decided I wasn't going to live my life as a political chump. I'm going to live my life as a Christian champion. That's how I'm going out. That's how I'm going out. This is how I am. That's not how I used to be. Thank God for deliverance. So, did I make some things clear? And yes.
I think the first point I want to make is that I really appreciate your speaking to the significance of Frederick Douglass. He has for many years been one of my
Yes.
heroes. Secondly, I want to speak in approval of your message that the conservatism today needs to become more inclusive. I think desperately so. It needs to become more inclusive. You know, the left is always referring to demographics.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're right. The demographics are against the conservative movement as it stands today. It needs to become more inclusive. What I think is problematic about your argument is the appropriation of Douglass to do that. And the point I would make is that the Republican Party of the 19th century is not the Republican Party today.
Right.
The Democratic Party of the 19th century is not the Democratic Party of today. So you simply can't move Douglass from the 1860s, 70s, and 80s to today and say, you know, he brings us leverage. It just doesn't work. So much has happened to both political parties over the past century and a half.
Yeah.
And I think you will find, I am thoroughly familiar with the historical literature on Douglass. You will find that most of those historians would argue that today, Douglass would be a Democrat.
Okay, me cover the first part. In terms of one of the things that we teach, I didn't say it here, the Republican Party today does not resemble the party of Frederick Douglass. That's why I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican. That's why I'm anti-establishment Republican Party. That's clear. And our goal is to help the Republican Party get back to where it was. I mentioned about, in the example I gave, elevating the poor, having respect for the Constitution, defending the Constitution. So when I say I'm a Frederick Douglass Republican, I'm not saying I'm half the Republican Party. I said earlier, I got Republican Party's bad, Democrat Party's worse. And we're anti-establishment Republican Party. To say that Douglass would be a Democrat today, I would disagree with that because I wouldn't put words in Douglass's mouth. He specifically said, I'm a Republican. He specifically said, and I never intend to belong to the other party. But Douglass would not be happy with the Republican Party. He'd be agitated. Douglass despised the Democratic Party. Why? It was a party that put his folks in slavery. That stripe don't come off that zebra. That doesn't change. So to say Douglass would be a Democrat, I would have problems with that because that history doesn't change. I don't care if the KKK improves, I'm not going to join the KKK. You follow me? I don't care how much the Democrat Party improved, Douglass wouldn't join the Democrat Party. He would join the party that had emancipation on his mind, not enslavement. Has things changed over history with party alignment? The Republican Party made a mistake in the 60s where it became a refuge for some of the Dixiecrats. That was a problem. That's when a lot of black folks left the Republican Party. Okay? So what goes to show you then that racism has no political face because there's no perfect political party. So I can't talk for Douglass because Douglass said it. I'm not going to be a Democrat. He despised it. So why would he join something later that he despised? That's like despising the KKK and joining it. I don't get that. But he would be agitating the Republican Party to the hilt like the Tea Party is agitated because he was about freedom. And Douglass wasn't stuck on a label. So that's what I'm trying to get to. It's not about being a Democrat or Republican, it's about your values. Douglass wasn't stuck on a label. Before Douglass was a Republican, he was in the Liberty Party. So it's not about the label, it's about the principles. But to get to your point, I just want to emphasize the point. It doesn't matter how much the Democrat Party improved. That zero is on the back of that, the stripes on the back of that zero. One of the reasons why I decided personally to get involved in the Republican Party, even though I'm not happy with them, I am agitating them, I decided I did not want to be part of a party that put my great-great-grandfather and grandmother into slavery. I used to do that, I ain't doing it no more. But at the same time, I'm agitating the Republican Party because they're not right either. Both parties have done some kind of good to black folks. The Democrat Party has a longer history of it, long abusive history, criminal history, and they lie about it. They lie about it. Get your hand up.
After I read one or two Frederick Douglass books, I came to the conclusion that he was actually greater than Martin Luther King because he faced greater dangers, a lot greater danger. But, of course, Martin Luther King was a Republican too, which you probably know. Well, at least he had a card because when he came up, he couldn't be a Democrat.
Let me touch on that. I did some research on that.
That's not true.
Dr. King never said he was a Republican. He never said he was a Democrat. Matter of fact, when you read Dr. King was a Democratic socialist. Dr. King was a Democrat. He believed in wealth distribution. He believed in guaranteed income. Dr. King never aligned himself with any political party for this particular reason. He didn't want to lose his prophetic edge and force critique them and criticize them. Now, Daddy King was a registered Republican. Daddy King died a Democrat. Daddy King gave the invocation at the 1972 and 76 Democrat Party convention. Why? When Dr. King was in jail in 1960, Dr. King was in jail in Atlanta, the King family called Richard Nixon, who was the vice president and a presidential candidate, to get their son out of jail. Nixon did nothing. Nothing. So the King family then called the two Kennedy brothers. Robert Kennedy called the judge to get the charges dropped. John Kennedy called Coretta to check on him. And Daddy King said, at first I wasn't going to vote for Kennedy because of his religion, but since he got my boy out of jail, I'm going to take 10 million votes to him and put it in his lap. So, it is not true to say Dr. King. Matter of fact, when you read the memoirs of Coretta Scott King, it talks about that Dr. King was a democratic socialist. He believed that capitalism breed competition and socialism breed cooperation. He wanted to take the best of the two and form to help reform America and make it better. That was his point. Now, I disagree with some of that, but that's what his point was. Your point.
Is it true that he still did have a Republican card at some point?
This is what I found out. He voted for Eisenhower in 56. He went to Atlanta. He got there too late to pay the poll tax, so he didn't vote in 1960. And I guarantee you, he didn't vote for Goldwater. Because in the online course, I give an image. Dr. King did a press release when Goldwater won a nomination. Dr. King gave a press conference. He had a press release, and I have a copy of the press release on the online course. Dr. King said it is unfortunate and disastrous that the Republican Party has nominated Senator Barry Goldwater as a presidential candidate. I encourage all Negroes and all white people with goodwill to vote against Goldwater. The problem that Dr. King had with Goldwater was this, because Dr. King said in the press release, he said Goldwater's not a racist, but his views give aid and comfort to the racists. Dr. King said. Dr. King basically said was, Mr. Goldwater, you want to be so constitutionally right that you're morally wrong. You're going to tell black folks in Mississippi, in Alabama, that their future's in the hands of these racist politicians, and the government should not intervene, that kind of thing. I got this from reading the memoirs of Douglas King, and most of it came from the writers of Douglas, but also Taylor Branch. Read Taylor Branch's books. Taylor Branch gives a detailed history of the civil rights movement, and this stuff is in there. I love these questions, by the way. Yes, sir.
Did your dad work at the Redstone Arsenal?
My dad worked at George C. Marshall Space Flight Center, and he worked with Walter von Braun.
Oh, that was my next question.
Yes, sir.
If he knew von
Yes, sir.
Braun.
Yes, sir.
I was the missile man, and he was one of our vendors.
Okay, so you spent some time in Huntsville.
No, the
No.
missiles came from there.
Yes, right. That's right. My dad worked on the Saturn V and the lunar buggy. He worked on the navigation system, the gyro system at that time, the GPS system. Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever read or made the acquaintance of Beverly Johnson? She's an author out of the Detroit area.
I heard the name, have not met her.
She writes a lot of historical romances that feature black characters.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I got out of her stories is, yes, black people did vote Republican
Yes.
in the early days, but by the time of Reconstruction being over, they had gotten so fed up with Republicans taking them for granted, they went Democrat. And for the life of me, I haven't figured out why we've gone down.
Yeah.
It's curious.
That's a whole different discussion because it's, why would you fight? You'd be more agitated, didn't. Why would you, what happened was, when black folks felt politically homeless, when the party of Lincoln and the party of emancipation nominated Goldwater, who sided with the racists, black folks felt politically homeless. Republican Party don't want us, Democrat Party's worse. What we gonna do? Black folks felt politically homeless, but then the Democrat Party started courting them. I'm tired of it, that kind of thing. So it goes. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if in your presentation, do you present answers like you did when you talked about Dr. King?
Yes, and I covered that.
The total answer, whereas it might, I don't know what I was trying to say, a lot of people don't touch that.
The question, do I cover this online course? It's called the elephant in the room. That's the module that I spent a lot of time on. I get into what happened in '64. I get into Dr. King's press release. I talk about Dr. King not being a Republican. He never said it. Frederick Douglass was a self-proclaimed Republican. Dr. King wasn't. I talk about the blue bomb. You heard the blue bomb? Remember the blue bomb? When I'll get into the course. Y'all stick on by the course for a second. The blue bomb. When Dr. King got out of jail, this is October 1960, the Sunday before the general election, because Daddy King promised Kennedy, you gonna get the black vote. You got my boy out of jail. I'm gonna help you get the black vote. It's called the blue bomb. This is a Sunday before Tuesday in the general election in '60. 2 million flyers were made. And these 2 million flyers went out to black churches in the South, major churches in the South. And all that flyers said, no comment Nixon versus a candidate with a heart, John F. Kennedy. over with. Over with. Ever since then, the Republican Party lost control of the narrative, lost the black vote. How do you get it back? And keep in mind now, only way the left can keep control of the narrative, they got to lie about the history. That's why some of the websites are lying.
Yep.
And they got to accuse us of being racist.
Yep.
Because why? We got truth. Makes sense to you?
If you go to a church, can you do the same presentation?
Can I go?
About the separation of church and state?
Yeah. When we're, my brother is a preacher 30 years. When we're invited to churches to speak, I don't get into the political stuff mainly. I just talk about value voting. Vote the way that shows your love, your allegiance to God you say you serve. Vote your values. And then if God wants you to be a Democrat, you go there. Because you got to go where God plants you. And wherever God plants you, you be a light in darkness. Don't just go along to get along. You be light in darkness. Because God needs people in both parties with a Frederick Douglass perspective. So I think the mistake the Republican Party is making, the Republican Party is trying to recruit folks, especially the black community, to become Republicans. No, you don't want to recruit them. If you stay true to your values and you inspire them to go their values, they'll figure out where they want to land.
The problem is the Republicans
That's right.
staying true to their values.
That's right. That's the problem. That's the problem.
You've already touched on it a little bit, but the left is very crafty in the way they state their message. You know, you talk about speaking in churches and things like that. You know, they make it a 501c3 thing now where you can't do that. You can't talk politically in a church or they take away your tax-free status. So they give you that and then they start to take it away. Same with, you know, the entitlement programs. You know, the Democrats and liberals say, you know, we're doing this to help folks out. You know, and then you can't take that away because then you're being mean to them. So they're very good at crafting what they want to do and holding it over your head.
Exactly. That's one thing why we as conservatives, we got to learn how to take control of some of these words. Because they take the words and just turn it around. And that's the problem. That's part of the deception. That's part of the propaganda. We got to take control of the narrative and start redefining, not redefining, but getting the true meaning of these words that the left has totally just used to confuse people, to keep them on a plantation of enslavement. Yes, sir.
What's the difference between what he just described and a heroin dealer?
Nothing. That's right. If you want to make a person a slave, you don't educate them. And as a matter of fact, if you don't know the truth, you can't recognize a lie. So you never know that you're being oppressed. Harriet Tubman said on one occasion, remember Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad lady? She said, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more only if they knew they were slaves. Yeah. I appreciate this. I could go all night, but I'm not going to disrespect your time. Don't take me back.
Enjoy your message. Do you take MasterCard?
I take, I prefer gold and silver, to be honest with you. But I take all forms of plastic.